Okay, I think we're good.
Mm-hmm.
Yay! All right, world. This is episode 2 of EnneaTalk. Super exciting. Thank you both for being here so much. It's a huge thing to talk about type. It's very personal. It's very personable. It's very vulnerable. Yeah, thank you just for being willing to do that.
Oh, our pleasure.
Yeah, I'd like to give you guys a little intro before I put my Enneagram hat on. I just like to say, for those of you that don't know, this is my amazing, wonderful, beautiful, talented, awesome sister and her amazing, wonderful, beautiful, awesome, talented husband. And they are wonderful and I love them so much. And just to jump right into things. So this is Shauna Weaver. She is a type 1 with a 2 wing. She is a counselor and mental health professional. She is a photographer and an artist, amongst other things. And this is her husband, Ben Weaver. He is a type 7. He has been a youth pastor. He has been a life coach. He is the founder and lead consultant of Bigger Story, which is business and marketing consultants. And I'll let him talk a little bit about that in a second. And this is public knowledge, so I can say it. They are expecting their first child, my first niece or nephew, and probably no one's more excited other than them than me. So that's pretty awesome. Congratulations, guys. That's absolutely wonderful. So I'm going off on a tangent. So why don't you, each take a moment, just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourselves, and yeah, then we'll jump right into it.
You first, baby.
Okay. Well, I put some peppermint oil in my eye accidentally shortly before this started, so I just want to call it off. I'm like, yeah, I feel like you did a really thorough introduction. The only addendum that I might make is that I am graduating in a couple weeks, so I'm not officially a mental health professional, but on my way.
You've done your time.
Yeah, it certainly feels like it at this point. Yeah, I'm honestly not sure what else to say.
Hey, that's great. Thank you. Ben, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, thank you for that introduction, Benji. I really appreciate it. So I guess some of I'm original. So I don't know if you mentioned this or not. I can't remember. We're in St. Louis. It's where we're at right now. Yes. St. Louis is where I grew up, where I call home. And Shauna moved here to go to seminary and get her master's here a few years back. And so we live in a quaint, small little neighborhood on a dead end street here in St. Louis. If I look randomly out, it's because I have a squirrel moment because we're out like looking in the neighborhood, but we love where we live. We love what we're up to. Goodness, I love everything adventure, everything epic, as many sevens naturally do. I love snowboarding. I love bourbon. I love the St. Louis Cardinals. I love getting what I get to do. So really, the quick version of my business and what I get to do is I help businesses that really struggle talking about what they do, what they offer to their customers. I help them find the words to reach their customers so they can grow their business and really tell a much bigger story of their business. And really, for me, it's all about growing God's kingdom and what he's doing. So that's a huge passion. That's a really short version of what we do. We love it. It's all marketing stuff, but we have a blast.
And he does a great job. He's made for it.
Awesome. Perfect. Well, that was great. Thank you. So my first question, taking turns, how long have you, separately or corporately, how long have you been aware of the Enneagram, and how did you come to realize what type you were?
Why don't you go?
I would say it's probably been a couple of years now for me. I'd start seeing a few things on social media, friends that I'd follow, little memes here and there. And I was a little bit curious as to what it was. I was like, what is this? And then I was messaging on direct message back and forth with a friend about it. And then I asked Shauna, and she was a little bit familiar with it at the time. She said, and she said, I think you're a 7, which apparently you're not supposed to tell people what they are.
But this was early on. Yes, and this was very early on.
Before they set Enneagram rules into place. Yeah.
It happens.
And so I told that friend on direct message, I said, my girlfriend thinks I'm a 7. And she was like, no, you're not supposed to like, type people. I was like, okay, sorry, I broke a rule. Anyway, I was told it, but I didn't know what a 7 was in full honesty. And so I just did start doing research. And the way that I work, Benji, is whenever I dive into something, I dive all in. And so I think I read like 3 books and multiple articles, and it didn't take me long to figure out that I actually a 7. I gravitated to that very, very quickly. I didn't in full, and maybe we can go to this later, but the 2 discrepancies I had was I a 3 or a 7? And there's those are often mistyped.
Yes, they are. Yes,
but after, honestly, it was probably 6 months of me going back and forth, but then I finally realized, no, I'm a 7. A lot of my close friends though were labeling me as a 3, so that was interesting.
Yeah, I've just as
what the distinguisher was for you. I'm sorry.
Oh, just as a tangent, sorry. A lot that you're absolutely right. A lot of people when they're they'll struggle with that. There's a fine line there. There's so many similarities between 3 and 7. So yeah, very interesting. Sorry, carry on. What were you saying?
Oh, I just thought it was interesting how he went about distinguishing that.
Yeah. Well, there was a lot of things I read, here's, if you're a 7, you're more of this, a 3, more of that. I think the biggest thing for me was, I feel like, and I'm going to use an example that really hit home with me. A 3 goes on vacation, takes pictures, posts them, and tells them how awesome their vacation was. Like, look at these epic views. We're great. We're awesome. It's image. A 7 goes on vacation, might post a photo, but then plans the next adventure. Tells a few people. They're not really that consumed about the image of it. And I thought that's really more me. I'll post a few photos, but I'm not about to. And I know that may sound a little bit silly, but for me, one of them that was a big thing for me was less performance and more just like, let's go somewhere. Let's do epic stuff.
Yeah. That's so good. I love that. That's great.
So I learned about the Enneagram. Well, I had heard about it increasingly. I was a Myers-Briggs fan, like hardcore Myers-Briggs.
Till you die.
Yeah. And so I'd hear about the Enneagram and I'm like, I didn't really understand it. I just knew that it talked about depravity, and I didn't like that. I prefer to hear about how I was intuitive and whimsical and whatever that these personality characteristics that the Myers-Briggs tends to highlight, not realizing how unique it was in that it tells you why you are the way you are and core longings and all of that. So it's probably spring of 2018 in seminary that Beth McCord, my professor's sister, actually, and she is your Enneagram coach, virtually visited our class and explained the Enneagram to us. And it still took me some time. I had taken a couple tests, and one said that I was a 1, wing 2. And the other said that I was a 6. And I was like, well, 1 is a moral perfectionist. It kind of sounds like a nun that goes around hitting people over the head with a Bible and judging them or something. It's like, I don't think that's me. There's just nothing on the surface, nothing on paper about it that appealed to me, to be honest. So I was like, no, I don't think that's me. I'm a 6. And so for a while, and I identify with aspects of the 6 for sure. But so for a while, I don't know, maybe a year or more, I thought that I was a 6. And I told people that I was a 6. And it wasn't until another class where that same professor asked us to listen to a Beth McCord interview with Annie F. Downs, where she talked about the core longings.
Yeah.
And when they went through the 1, as they're describing the 1, I'm kind of like, wait, this is, and I had forgotten that I had tested as a 1. And I'm like, gosh, it's really resonating with me. That's weird. And then she said that the core message that a 1 longs to hear is that you are good. And I just started crying. That just resonated with me in such a meaningful way that I had to acknowledge I am a 1. So, yeah, there's a process of accepting that. Not that ones aren't great. It's just, I don't know. I think we're much better people than we look on paper, but not to be judgmental. That was stereotypical of my type, but
no, that's really great. And I think a lot of people are where other people may see the wonder and, you know, really awesome things about a particular type. I think that some people who are that type kind of sometimes are just like focus on maybe those things that are, you know, negative, like, or, you know, things that are not the desirable parts of a type, you know, like type 8 or, you know, can be seen as angry, or type 4 can be seen as emotional, but they're only focusing on one aspect of that type. So I think that, you know, everyone, whatever their number is, might think, except probably 7s, are probably like, I'm fine with my number, you know.
Totally.
But one interesting thing is, you know, 1s, 2s, and 6s, ironically, are in that same stance where, you know, they have that commonality. They're living in the moment, and they are what they call thinking repressed, which I'm going to chat a little bit about that later. But that's very telling, the fact that you had really all 3 of those numbers, one with a wing 2 and a 6. I
forgot that they were in a triad.
Yeah. That's great. Thank you guys so much for sharing that. So just a real quick thing, like, what is the most, and maybe you have a couple different things, but what is the most typish thing about you? Like, you know, if you think, you know, we can talk stereotypes for a second. What's the most 7-ish thing about you, or what's the most 1-ish thing about you that you feel comfortable sharing?
I think for me, there's probably a few I can name. I think for me is the ability. Shauna, sometimes she's like, I don't know how you do it. I can spin just about anything positive.
Oh,
spin.
Right. Like, yeah. Reframe. Sorry.
I
thought you like, can you spin a coffee cup? I really want to see that. Sorry. No, I get you mean now.
Sorry. Yeah. Reframe. All of that is, you know, like the joke I made with someone who I was like, you know, there could be a car bomb and the thing is burning outside. And I said, well, that's actually a good bonfire. We should probably gather some gosh. Like, I can spin everything.
Yes.
And
it's not spinning, like, it's not PR to you. It's just,
yeah, that's natural.
That's
yeah.
You're approaching it.
Yeah. And so I think for me, it serves me well at times. I can step into a room, into an audience, into a situation, and can help reframe and help people understand, hey, there's a silver lining here. There is something here that we don't want to miss. But at times it also is detrimental to my development. And I think there are times where I've reframed things and it's cost me, I think cost me some growth and development of understanding just the other side of that, of what that could look like. So I think that's one of the things for me is I feel like I'm eternally optimistic. And if I'm not, come find me in 5 minutes and I will be.
That's probably the most 7-ish thing I could possibly think of. That's amazing. What about you, Shauna?
For me, I'm struggling to think of a specific example of it, but just kind of general perfectionism. It was one of those things where it was so a part of me that I struggled to see it, and it took time and some seminary and some maturing experiences to kind of to step back and be like, oh, not everyone's standards are this high, but it was pervasive in everything that I did. And imperfections just jump out at me. It's not like I go looking for them. It's not, like I am torturing myself trying to, what can I perfect? But it's just always there. It's just always there. They stare at me all the time. And it's just a matter of, what is my relationship going to be with those things that I see?
That's good. That reminds me, a lot of Enneagram teachers will say that someone who identifies as type 1, it's almost as if they have a voice in their head that's not only always telling them what they're doing wrong or what they're doing bad, or did you really want to do that? Did you really mean to say that? But then sometimes they inadvertently find themselves doing that because of that voice that's telling them that. I don't know if that's something you've recognized or that resonates with you, but
Yeah,
what's yours?
inner critic. Yeah. I've
Yeah.
also heard it called the inner committee for ones, because it is so strong and so powerful. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a thing.
Awesome. So that being said, do you guys, so, and this is the first time I'm mentioning wings. And just for our audience, wings are basically the influence of a number. I feel like I have to illustrate, but wings are the influence of a number to the left or to the right of a particular number. So a type 1 would have either a 9 wing or a 2 wing. A type 7 would have either a 6 wing or an 8 wing. So speaking about wings, Shauna, you said that you identify as a 1 with a 2 wing. Where do you recognize that too?
I recognize it in my desire to take care of the people that I love, my desire to help, and even this compulsion to help, to be the person who maybe, you know, to use a biblical reference, like the Martha in the kitchen, or yeah, and there's a beauty in that, but I think yeah, it's that, okay, when is it this compulsion, and when is it this no, this is how I love people well, and I can lean into that. I even do with you sometimes. I don't know if you notice, but like I just find myself asking, like, are you eating okay? Like, are you taking care of yourself? It's just,
He does.
it's disruptive to me to think that maybe you don't have what you need, or that like I can help you and I'm not. And it's a very typical Enneagram type for people in the helping profession.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so 1 wing too. I love that. What about you, Ben? Do you identify with a particular wing or?
Yeah, I do. I used to think it was more of a 6 wing, but I've recently realized it's probably more of the 8, especially more that I've done that. And because I honestly, the more I read about true 7s, there's just some things that I'm like, you know, I can't identify a lot with a true 7. Like and forgive me if you're a true 7 listening or watching. There are like people, the way that I understand it is like, you don't hold schedules, you go flying around in meetings, you're in an airplane all the time, like you just, you know, I know that sounds like I'm giving
well, those are the negative aspects.
Yeah, the negative. I mean, I know, but I'm like, gosh, I feel like I'm pretty organized, and I actually keep a schedule, and I hold meetings, and I'm like, okay, so that's weird, but I know I'm a 7. So to me, the 8 is probably more the dominant thing. More for reasons of, though, for the organizational side of it, the strategy of that, but even more so like just I would say maybe the justice that's involved with that, of standing up for truth. And there are moments where I'll have strong 8 tendencies. They don't come out often, but when they do, they come out very, very strong. And I won't give.
Yeah.
Yeah, she can probably speak to that more than I can. She notices it.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think that's so true, because I do know a handful of 7s, and there's always, you know, we can't just set people who are the same number next to each other and compare like that. And yet, there is this tendency, at least in my mind, to look for parallels. And I'm like, oh, they're different from, like, they're all different from Ben. And of course, they're going to be different from you. But I think it is that 8 wing of, for me, I see it in just how driven you are. That I don't think is characteristic of a pure 7. Just so driven and so tenacious, like nobody's business, that I think is where some of that 8 comes in. Would you say that, Benji?
I would say that definitely plays a part, especially that this is something I believe in and nothing's going to change that. That's very 8-ish. I think that something too that might be influencing that 7 is, you know, they say the stress and security points for 7, like when you're, you know, hypothetically, when you're feeling stress, although some people say you can take good and bad qualities from either stress or security point, but that's going off on a tangent. But so one of your stress point would be a 1, you know, which is ironic, you know. So, you know, if you're feeling maybe a little anxious, you know, there's some energy coming from that oneness. But the other thing that really sticks out, assuming that you are not feeling stress when you are being organized and getting things done, is when 7s are, you know, in a secure place where they feel centered and secure, and, you know, they are contemplative, they are thoughtful, and they do a lot of research, and that could, because they're integrating to 5. So maybe that's just things that pop into my head. Again, like you say, people are as different as every different shade of there is of a color. And I think that 8 definitely plays a lot there. But those are also just some things that kind of stick out to me a little bit. So Ben, my next question is for Ben. What are some things about being a 7 that you found has helped you in all the different like endeavors that you've done in your life, like being a youth pastor, being a life coach? Have you, you know, a consultant? Like, how does 7 aid you in that? And then the other thing that you can answer after that is, how has that ever come to bite you or to hurt you, like that 7-ness, if that makes sense?
No, that's a really good question. I'll tell you a story. That's what 7s do.
Perfect.
I was in a meeting about 3 years ago now. I was in the place in my career where I was trying to navigate what was next, in the tail end of that navigation, transitioning from the church world into owning and running my own business. And there was a couple of people that were consulting me and helping me navigate that transition and helping me to formulate what this new business was. You mentioned coaching. It was stepping into that world, doing more speaking, things like that. And they had done sort of like an analysis of me, of Ben Weaver, and forming out this brand. And we were sitting around the table. They'd come to the table with their findings. And I told them my story from front to back. And one of them leaned over to me and she said, "Ben Weaver, you're an inspirational leader." And I sat back in my chair, and she looked at me and she says, "But you're just now starting to figure that out." Wow. And I was like, yeah. like as in, you're just starting to own that. You haven't wanted to own that, but that's who you are. Yeah. And so I tell you that story to let you know that everything that I do, there is a touch in consulting, coaching, podcasting, speaking, whatever it is. I want to inspire and push people towards a life and a vision for their company, for whatever that is much better than where they're at right now. Yeah. Like, that's where my 7 just comes to life. Like, I've had several people say, like, "Dude, you just tell me where we're going. I'll be right behind you, because you're just going somewhere." And I don't, and for me, what's weird about that, Benji, is like, I think that everyone else thinks that way. And my close friends say,
we tend to do that. Yeah.
My close friends say, we don't. That's like, but I don't know where you're getting it, but I'm like, you guys can't see that, whatever that is over there, that life, that incredible mountaintop experience. Like, let's go. Like, here and so that for me is something, as I've navigated my 7-ness and integrating more wholly, that's something I'm really hanging on to. Like, nope, this is who I am. This is who Christ made me to be, and I'm not going to step out of that. I think where it hurts me then is almost is in the same conversation of, I can tend to leave people behind. And I can tend to step so far forward that unless someone has, the courage enough to say, "Hey, like, can you slow down a little bit?"
Which is part of the 8-wing.
Yeah, the part of the 8-wing. And so I have to be very mindful of that. And that has served me. So my vision and desire for others, let's just use youth pastor, it served me well. But there were times, especially in my later years as youth pastor, I had to learn how to go back and like gather the hens. Like, "Hey, is everyone okay? Like, are we, Yeah. So when you're leading people, there's that tension. You're like, let's go. and you think everyone's following you, but that's not necessarily the case. And so I just that's something I've had to be very mindful. I've only learned that honestly, probably in the last 5 years of my career and what I've been doing. It even still, I screw up all the time. So I think it's, yeah.
That's amazing. And that just that awareness though shows a sign of maturity that you are aware of it and you recognize it and you make it a point to check back, you know? Wow.
Yeah.
I love that.
Thanks.
Shauna, so coming from a professional psychology perspective, do you find that the Enneagram lines up and agrees with what modern psychology says about people? Or do you see that there's commonalities there? Is there anything that's like, these are vastly different? Or do you see that they, have some similarities? Or, I know that Enneagram in some circles is kind of talked about in psychology. Is it ever like, no, that's not true? Or is it like, yeah, this is good, you can use it? Does that make sense?
Yeah, they're kind of hard to line up because of all of the wide variety of theories that there are in psychology. I mean, you talk about Enneagrams being, Enneagram types being as many colors. That is true of psychology as well. There are just so many schools of thought. And so the question would be, well, what is the school of thought? I think. And then I think it varies by the counselor. You have counselors who they see the value in it as a tool to help their clients and to better understand themselves. And such as myself, and they utilize it insofar as the client is willing. And then you have counselors and even clients. I have had some clients myself who are just like, I'm just not sure about this. It's been around for a long time. It kind of looks like a pentagram. I'm just not comfortable. And it's my job as a counselor to respect that and to let them know, like, okay, well, I believe it's a valuable tool, but if that's how you feel, then we won't be using that.
Yeah.
If that answers your question.
It does. Yeah, it does.
It just varies so much.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure there's so many in I guess if you say psychology, like think of all the different personality things that are out there that some people really swear by the Myers-Briggs, and some people are really, this is their thing. And some people just synthesize all of it. And some people are like, science. Or yeah. I guess Myers-Briggs is based in science.
If I had to take like a general pulse on like, what does popular psychology think about the Enneagram? I feel like they're very pro Enneagram, very, very generally speaking.
Nice. I get that vibe, but like, I've also seen places where people are like, well, it's not backed by science. So, but then the rest of the world's like, yeah, but it's like working for everybody. So,
I mean, the proof is in the pudding. I feel like people become believers if and when they are, believers, if and when they are able to investigate it for themselves.
Right. That is so true. How does being a type 1 affect you positively or negatively when you're working with your clients or with people interacting,
Yeah, that's a good question. And someone had asked me this not too long ago, and I'd love to give it more thought. But
we can come back if you like.
I will say this: you would think that as a perfectionist, like I am, I must be judging my clients, right? And it's like, no, actually, that's not true. I feel like I'm very accepting of other people as the sun makes its way into
your eyes.
Into my eyes. It's okay. We like each other.
We do.
Yeah. So I don't see, kind of verbally processing here, but I don't see like the perfectionism that is so characteristic of a 1 coming out in the counseling room. I do see my desire to stay focused. I like to stay focused on a goal. Trying to think of what else. Justice, I think, is my desire for justice, the importance that I place on justice. So far, I think that's the biggest way it has come out, is as I'm hearing about a client's story, trauma is always an injustice being done. There is so much energy. There's so much energy, you could say anger, that comes up for them, that can be pretty healing. I mean, it's a healing experience for someone to just get intensely angry on your behalf, you know, and that doesn't look like throwing books across the counseling room. That just looks like, man, I feel this for you. And that is not okay. And what happened to you wasn't okay. And so long as I'm in this room, no one in this room is going to pretend like that was okay. So I think that's the biggest way that it has showed up. And then there are many more ways that my two comes into play into that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's neat to see. It's neat to see how many different ways you and Ben are integrated, because, you know, the security point of one is 7, and then you are in the anger triad with 8s, 9s, and 1s, Shauna, which means that anger and frustration sometimes is easily accessible, and you have that 8 wing, Ben. That is also, so there's that justice, and that this is right, this is not right. And then there's that sense of adventure that you guys connect on. It's just neat to see how, I guess integrated is the right word, how many different points that you guys connect with. And that brings me to my next question. That's so cool. I didn't plan that. I don't think I did. No, I didn't. So talk about how a 7 and a 1 complement each other. And like, how do you guys like, yeah, we're the same. How are you like, oh, no, here's the difference. You know, what does life look like for you guys in that regards?
Yeah, I just did a lot of talking.
Man, yeah. Well, let me go get the dirty laundry. I think from the let's just talk about the ways that's been helpful for us is, I feel like you mentioned the sense of adventure. You know, there is that longing and desire inside of her that comes out more and more all the time. And she is, it's weird saying this as a 7, she's way more spontaneous than I am. I like to plan it out, not like fully plan it out.
Sure.
Like, no, like we're going to go do this, but this is whatever. And if you mess up my plan along the way, we're going to have some friction. Right. And so that's been tough, but the adventure side has been great. I think some of the, you know, without getting into too many details, just for the sake of time, is there'll be a lot of things where I just don't think are that big of a deal. Full honesty. Like, I'm just like, not a big deal. Like, it'll be fine. Like, we're good. You know, like, we're good, you know, and she's like, we're not good. Like, that is a big deal.
Yeah.
And I'm having to learn that. And for you, those watching, I'll be 37 in July, and I'm a crusty, you know, was a crusty bachelor for like 36 years. And so there was a lot of independence in me, and that is still, you know, crusty on me. I don't know. I'm trying to pull this analogy further. It's not working. It's really not working.
Oh,
but
goodness.
The point is there's a lot of me to let go of and embrace the goodness of who she is and what she and her heart. And I'm still struggling a lot with that. And so for me, that's where we've had some rocky points, and all she's asking me to do is hear her and see her. It's not even necessarily that you want me to come across people and say, you're right, that is a big deal. You just want me to say, hey,
And that's a human being thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, correct. And
not to say that it wasn't a good point, but
no, you're right. It is. I think for me, it's before this turns into marriage counseling. No, so anyway, so that to me is some of the, I don't know if I was super clear, but
yeah, no, that was great.
That I've noticed, and I don't know, I'm sure you got some greater insights.
Yeah, I feel like I notice these things and how we complement each other, and how and how we sanctify one another as they come up. I feel like one thing is that you are so like, and I'm like, one thing at a time, do one thing, do it well, and we'll talk about the next thing. And then I can just be so, yeah, I don't know, perfectionistic, and you can be like, hey, look, I can fixate, and you can kind of lift my head.
Oh, that's so good.
It's one of the ways. Yeah.
So this is not on my list of questions, but you guys kind of brought something to my mind that, sevens are in that stance where you're always kind of looking forward. You're always thinking about what's coming up next. Yeah, I know I'm right here. I don't know what's back there, but it's full speed ahead, the trajectory. And whereas ones are more, ones, twos, and sixes are kind of like, what's happening right here, right now. I can look in the rearview mirror a little bit. Future's a little fuzzy, but it's there. But what's happening right here, right now? Do you guys ever run into that?
That is a huge one that I'm surprised that I didn't remember. Is that we could be on a cliffside at sunset with a blanket and a bottle of wine and just be soaking it in, and you're like, so let's talk about what we want to do tomorrow. Actually, let's talk about our next vacation.
The ice cream shop, right? We're going later. I'm thinking about flavor.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
So I have that. Yeah, just a kind of another way of grounding you. I think of being like right here, right now. Like,
yep.
Look at the colors in the sky. Look at that.
Yeah. And
I'm sure there's a flip side of that.
Yeah, no, and I think there are times where I can say, "Hey, I want you to go out." Like she probably, well, maybe I don't know. She could tell if she hates it or not. Like we've gone on hikes, and I remember we went on this long hike. It was like 9 or 10 miles a couple years ago.
Oh,
we're towards the end of this hike, beautiful state park here in Missouri that we love going to, and I think we're towards the end of the day. And I said, "All right, 5 years out, where do you want us to be?" And she was like, "What do you mean?" And I'm like, 5 years out, where are we get? So I'm like, let's set some goals is really what it was. And
which is helpful for me.
Sure. Yeah. And her responses were incredible.
I will go there. Like I'm happy to go there.
Right.
But
yeah.
I don't like
it's not where you live.
Yeah. And for me, like one of the things that is helpful for me, like she mentioned, helping me to stay present for things. For me, I think the biggest thing is if I can slow everything down, it helps me to stay super, super present. It does. Obviously, eliminating distractions is hugely important, but just slowing everything around me down is what I need. Really.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's helpful for everyone.
That's brilliant. And it's just, it's neat to see how, and that's one of the things I love about the Enneagram is just seeing how it's like that whole no man is an island thing, but really like how we need each other to make the whole circle, like to be balanced. It's not just, I can figure this out by myself. It's no, I need you to tell me you hear that? You hear the birds chirping? Isn't that beautiful? And you need someone else to say, hey, so what are we doing? The GPS says the road's out. Are we going to turn left or right in about 3 miles? It's so good to have that balance and people in our lives that help us to see those things. I guess our blind spots, really, things that we don't see naturally for ourselves. We can see, but it's like, oh yeah, tomorrow. Oh, or,
Yeah,
oh
sometimes
yeah, the
like,
past.
what are we having for dinner tonight? And I make a meal plan and all that, but then I'm in the moment until dinner time. And I was like, yeah, I can take some meat out of the freezer, be ready in
Oh, that's so awesome. All right, um, so Ben, as a 7, you are in the 5, 6, and 7, what they call the fear triad, or people that are prone to known to struggle with fear, and Shauna in the 8, 9, and 1 triad, known to struggle with frustration or anger. Talk about fear or frustration or anger. Does that play a role? Is that something you feel like you've overcome? Is it something you're like, I don't really deal with that? As comfortable as you feel like sharing, but are those things that's like, I deal with it all the time, or you know what, I used to, but I don't now? Do you recognize the presence of those things at all? Not that anyone likes saying, yeah, I struggle with fear, or yeah, but are those just, does that resonate with you at all, or does that bring up anything?
Yeah, absolutely. I think kind of like identifying my perfectionism, it took me a while to identify my anger.
Mm,
And part of that is because the irony of a 1 is in the anger triad, but they're a moral perfectionist, and it's not really morally acceptable to have anger.
mm-hmm,
And so there was a process of identifying that, a
mm-hmm,
process of accepting that, a process of learning what that feels like, even and especially in my body, learning how to manage that, learning how to channel that. So yes, you could say that resonates with me.
yeah, but you recognize that, and you are like, you're aware of it, and you are like not okay with it, but you're like, I understand that that's there, and you like, is it something, there are things that you are do to kind of manage it, or you just,
Mhm.
is it something that you don't really think about as much, or
Um, I think marriage has made me have to think about. I didn't think about it really when I was single. Um, but that is the beauty and the difficulty of marriage, is that
mm-hmm.
it's like, here's a full length mirror, you're naked, here's what's going on. um,
What a great
so
analogy.
what was I going to say? So I'm very much in the midst of that journey.
Mm-hmm.
And I think my relationship with it is still changing, because for 20 something years, um, I had held it at arm's length and
Mm-hmm.
kind of denied that it was there. And if it was there, it was bad. And not being aware of how that was affecting all of my relationships. And so I'm now at the place where I can I know that anger serves a purpose,
Mm-hmm.
and it is not bad. It is there for a reason. Um, the question is, are we feeling it? Are we feeling it appropriately, or are we channeling all these other feelings into it?
Mm.
Which is what I think I do sometimes. And so the process of like detangling those pipelines or wires. And so now I'm coming to the point where I'm able to say, whereas my default reaction to something might be anger, I'm now
Mm-hmm.
able to, on occasion, be like, oh, no, that just makes me sad. Or you know what? I'm afraid.
Mm.
Instead of having the anger rise up
That
inside me.
first thing, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, we are actively on a journey together. We are
Yeah.
we are learning to dance.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but buddy, I'm making progress with it, and I
Yeah.
am I am much more comfortable with.
Yeah.
So that's
Thank you
encouraging.
for sharing that.
Mhm.
Ben, does sevens are unique because they say fives internalize fear, sixes externalize fear, and sevens just stuff it away somewhere because it doesn't really exist. Does that resonate with you, or is that something that's like, oh, you don't really think about fear, being afraid, or anything like that?
No, not at all. No, I'm kidding.
Perfect.
Yes. Keep moving. No.
Yeah.
No, 100%. And that's something I think over the course of probably the last 6 years of my life, maybe a little bit, no, right, 6 or 7, that I've begun to recognize that more. That was even before the Enneagram. I think the Enneagram helped me to put words to it. Like if I'm feeling a specific way, like physically feeling a certain way, I can go, oh, that's anxiety,
Yeah.
or that's fear, or whatever, like naming that, or because I always knew what anger was. Like I know what anger feels like.
Yeah.
Naming that fear, anxiety, and just sitting there for a while. Like,
yeah.
There have been times, and it's funny to me now. In the moments, it wasn't funny, where I'll come to Shauna and I'll say, she's like, "Hey, where you been?" I said, "Well, I just had to go sit and cry for a little bit, And like 10 years ago, I wouldn't have thought about doing that. But it's like when I'm feeling a fear or sadness, it's like, nope, just sit here for a while. Like you don't need to be here for days.
Yeah.
Just sit and recognize it.
Yeah.
Again, I don't get it right all the time. There are times where I'll spin over it and she'll recognize it, like, "Hey, are you okay? Like, what's going on, really?" And you're really, really helpful in helping me do that. And crazy enough, I notice sometimes those emotions come out in exercise for me. Like she knows that she loves it. I love biking, and so I have a road bike. I'll go out to trails and roads around town, and there will be times where I'll get back and I will just be sobbing in the driveway. Wow. And it wasn't because of like what I listened to or whatever. It's just like I just needed to let go of some of these emotions that I was feeling. And then come in and talk to her about it.
And that's how you do that.
Yeah. It's just, and I would say that's even more recent, only maybe a year or two old. So yeah, the fear and anxiety thing is for real. And it comes in all shapes and sizes. And I'm just now I feel still in the infant stage of learning how to deal with it. But
that it's interesting. It makes me think of, and it's kind of brings me to one of my next questions, but sevens are in that stance where they're what they call feelings repressed. So sevens, you only want to ever focus on those positive, great, wonderful things. So we were interviewing last week, we had Forrest on, and he's also 7. He was saying, something for him is, music is something that gives him access to those emotions, because by himself, it's like, accessing those how do I access those emotions that I don't really want to deal with? So it sounds like for you, maybe getting in your body, getting into nature, just getting by yourself and contemplating things is something that kind of unlocks that door to being able to, like, okay, I'm sad, process those things instead of like stuff.
Yeah. And I would say for me too, in agreement with Forrest, it also is music, because sometimes music moves me.
Yeah.
There are instrumental songs that I'm like, every time I hear it, I'm crying. I'm like, what is that? So yeah, for sure, music does absolutely move me.
Yeah, there are many times where if he was on a drive or he was on a bike ride, he comes home, well, I had a good cry, and that might sound like, oh, what is wrong with him? But I'm like, no, I'm happy to hear that. He's processing his emotions. And he's got them. The question is, we've all got them. The question is, are we processing them? Are we paying attention to them? And how are we doing that? And so I'm like, oh, good.
And such a sign of maturity to be able to, hey, I just went and dealt with my feelings and I cried, and that's okay, because that's how. Right. That's just such a sign of like.
Which I admire a lot. I think with men, that's still viewed as weakness, and I'm like, women appreciate the heck out of and I know that we can't speak to generally, but I'm like, no, I'm pretty sure that, I don't know, I can only speak for myself, but I really admire that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's true manliness, is being able to speak like, this is how I feel, and that's okay. And because I'm a human, just like everybody else is a human, so that's so good. So that kind of brings me to my next question. And I can't believe an hour has almost rolled by already. It's crazy. But my next question, I guess, is for you, Shauna. So for 1s, 2s, and 6s, it's what they your repressed center is what they call thinking repressed. And it doesn't mean, of course, that you don't think. It just means that you're thinking, you know, a lot of Enneagram teachers will say non-productive thinking, like you're, and I'm sure as a one, you could attest to this better than me trying to describe it, but maybe you're overanalyzing something, or you're just you're stuck on something the way it should be or could be. Kind of like you mentioned that earlier, a fixation.
Yeah.
Would you say that kind of speaks to what would be considered repressed thinking or unproductive thinking?
I guess so. You know, especially having struggled with anxiety, I've spent so much time in my head that was confusing to me.
Yeah.
But so it's hard to answer that question because I'm like, well, if I'm not productive, I don't know what productive looks like. But I think as I just generally get healthier, and I talk back to the inner committee, and things like that I'm able to say, like, okay, I don't know that person thought that. I don't know what that person meant. I don't know that that's what's going to happen. So I'm at least able to identify it.
Yeah. 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 That's good. Yeah. So, both of you have a passion for people. And both of you have a passion for living life to the fullest and being your best selves, and for encouraging other people to live their life to the fullest and being their best selves. So, during this place of isolation, you know, and just in general, what are your thoughts or advice for, I guess, sevens and ones, but maybe just in general people for self-care and self-development? I know that's like a huge thing, you know, how can you sum that up in a window of time, but maybe just a couple, you know, things, and maybe more specific to your number, like self-care and self-development for a 7 and for a 1. And yeah.
Well, I know that I think self-care, a big piece of self-care for a 1 is self-compassion. So if we my clients hear me talk about this all the time, but if what a 1 struggles with is what we need is serenity, what we struggle with is this compulsion to reform, this awareness of things not being as they should, then that's a lack of acceptance. That's like, I mean, that is judgment, right? And so and we are on the front lines of that judgment all day long. And so and it's kind of exhausting, and so I think self-compassion is really, really, really important for a 1. Just learning to I've heard people say, well, how do you show compassion to yourself? Well, you show you compassion to yourself just like you show compassion to another person. Interact with yourself. You have an inner life. There you have an interpersonal dialogue, right? And so you treat that person with kindness. You give that person the benefit of the doubt. You accept them for where they're at, and for the mistakes that they've made, and for the human being that they are. And that's like mind-blowing for a 1 to think about, and especially to put into practice. But for me, it has made a difference. It has made a difference from you know, being this perfectionistic, miserable 1 to just kind of transitioning to 7hood. That's the tip that I think everyone needs self-compassion.
I was just gonna say, I'm like, this is good for everybody, you know, just, you know, compassion and loving yourself and not being, you know, letting things go and just having grace. That's perfect. About you, Ben, any thoughts?
I'm going to reflect back on something I shared on Facebook yesterday that I feel like could bring a little light to what I'm working on.
Sure.
You can help other 7s or anyone else for that matter. one of my favorite writers, philosophers, whatever you want to call him. He's just an incredible man of God. His name's Dallas Willard.
Mm-hmm.
One of his most well-known quotes, at least to me, is the most important thing in life for a man is not what he does, it's who he becomes.
Mm.
And so this season, and Shauna could speak to this, she's like, oh my gosh, she's been on this wagon for like well over a year.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just like, I don't want my life to be about what I do,
Mm-hmm.
even though I also do, but I really want it to be more about who am I becoming?
Yeah.
And I was having a conversation with some dear friends of mine, just men that I just do life with. And I just said, we all sort of agreed, like if as a people, as humanity in general, regardless of whether we have more time or not, whether we've been given this gift of nothingness, of sitting and resting, whatever that looks like, no matter where you're on that spectrum, if at the end of this whole crisis and pandemic, whatever, if we have not taken the opportunity to explore who we're becoming, we've missed an incredible opportunity and gift that God has given us.
Absolutely.
And so for me, like, that's been a huge piece of it. And it's slowing down. It's reading books that 5 years ago I might not have read, and getting different perspectives, and all of those things have been just become super, super important to me. Almost to the point, I mentioned it in my Facebook post, it is sort of a war that's happening inside of me right now. And I'm not,
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know if I can even put full words to it. But for me, I would just encourage anyone, whether you're a setter or not, to take this time. And some of you are like, Ben, I'm running harder than ever. I understand that, but we still have been offered a different perspective on life
Mm-hmm.
that I think we should take advantage of and hold
Mm-hmm.
on to. And so that for me has been a huge piece. And that comes out in how I sit in solitude and reflection and prayer and meditation, to journaling. It's affecting every movement of my day. So that's been a huge piece of what I've just been processing over the last probably 6 weeks, longer really, but that's definitely been a big piece.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. Both of you, those were like huge nuggets of wisdom and truth right there. Thank you guys so much for sharing. I can't believe it's already almost 8:30. Time has flown by. Any closing thoughts or remarks or anything before we kind of wrap things up?
I would say, you took in breath, baby. You good? Okay. I would say, I love and respect the Enneagram. It's been a huge tool for me, massively huge, in helping me to integrate my life and become more whole. Like it just really has. But at the end of the day, it is also just a tool.
Yeah.
It's not something to put so much weight in, that we start using it as a weapon, we start using it in all those things. And I'm sure you've had those conversations.
You're absolutely right.
And so I'm not saying something you already know or have been talking about, but for me, that's like, it's a tool, it's valuable, it's a self-discovery. You can talk about it with friends if you choose. But remember, at the end of the day, this is just a tool amongst them. So that to me is the brilliant piece of this. And I'm just so honored that you would have us on. Brother, it really means a lot that you would give us this opportunity. Really,
yeah, absolutely. Guys, thank you so much. I love you both so much. Check out, and this is for everybody that's watching, make sure you check out Bigger Story on Facebook and also on Instagram and at biggerstory.com. You can contact me, Benjamin, at growandflourish.com, or on Facebook or Instagram. You can check out all of our coaches and more about Grow Life at growandflourish.com. Thank you all for this wonderful opportunity. Thank you guys, and have a great and wonderful Friday. This is Friday. Have a great and wonderful Friday. Thank you all. Have a great night.